On this blessed Sunday, January 25th, we gather not merely by chance, but by a quiet calling of the Spirit. We come carrying the weight of busy minds, restless hearts, and homes that have felt the tremor of anxiety and the sharp edges of conflict. Yet even now, hope stands at the door. A home is more than walls and windows. It is the place where our fears whisper and our faith answers back. It is where love learns how to breathe even when the air feels heavy. Today we speak a powerful prayer, not as a ritual of words, but as an act of courage. A prayer that says anxiety does not get the final word. A prayer that declares peace is not fragile and harmony is not beyond our reach. Let this moment remind us that when we invite the sacred into our living rooms, our kitchens, and our conversations, healing begins. And when prayer rises, conflict bows and calm finds its way home. Prayer is not a fragile thing. It is not a whisper that disappears into the ceiling or a hopeful thought that drifts away unanswered. Prayer is a strong hand on the door of fear. It is a declaration that says, "This home will not be ruled by unrest." When we speak of prayer as protection, we are speaking of a living force, quiet yet unyielding, that wraps itself around a home the way love wraps around a child in the night. Every home carries stories. Some are sung in laughter, echoing through hallways. Others are spoken softly behind closed doors where worries sit heavily on the chest, and arguments linger like unfinished sentences. Anxiety does not knock before entering. Conflict does not ask permission to stay. They arrive disguised as exhaustion. Misunderstandings, financial strain, unspoken resentment, or the slow erosion of patience. Prayer then becomes the guardian at the gate, not denying that pain exists, but refusing to let it take command. Protection does not always look like the absence of struggle. Often it looks like strength in the midst of it. Prayer protects by creating a boundary where fear cannot grow unchecked. It reminds the heart that it is not alone, that even in moments of uncertainty, there is a presence greater than confusion, stronger than despair, and more faithful than doubt. Prayer becomes the language through which we say, "We are held." In a praying home, anxiety may knock, but it does not unpack its bags. Conflict may raise its voice, but it does not own the conversation. Prayer shifts the atmosphere, not with noise, but with intention. It slows racing thoughts, it steadies trembling hands. It softens sharp words before they are spoken and invites understanding where anger once stood ready. Protection through prayer is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is the mother who prays while folding laundry, asking for peace she cannot yet see. It is the father who bows his head after a long day, seeking patience instead of retreat. It is the child who learns that fear can be spoken aloud and answered with faith. Prayer teaches a household how to pause, how to breathe, how to remember that love is stronger than the moment. When prayer lives in a home, it stands watch over relationships. It reminds us that words have weight and that silence can either heal or harm. Prayer teaches restraint when emotions run high and courage when difficult conversations must be had. It protects not by building walls between people, but by building bridges of empathy, compassion, and shared hope. There is a quiet authority in prayer. It does not shout down anxiety. It outlasts it. It does not wrestle conflict into submission. It transforms it. Through prayer, a home learns how to respond rather than react. It learns that peace is not weakness and gentleness is not surrender. Prayer reframes power, showing us that true strength lies in humility, listening, and grace. Protection also means remembrance. Prayer reminds us of who we are when the world tries to convince us we are only our worries. It recalls our values when stress threatens to rewrite them. In prayer, a home remembers that it was built for love, not for fear, for connection, not division, for growth, not stagnation. Prayer becomes the keeper of the home's original promise. Even on days when prayer feels heavy on the tongue, it still protects. Even when faith trembles, it still stands. Protection does not require eloquence. It requires honesty. A whispered help can be as powerful as a long-spoken blessing. A silent tear can be a prayer all its own. What matters is the turning of the heart toward hope. Prayer protects by inviting the sacred into ordinary spaces, into kitchens where meals are rushed and patience is tested, into living rooms where conversations can either heal or hurt, into bedrooms where worries replay themselves in the dark. When prayer enters these spaces, they are no longer just rooms. They become sanctuaries, not perfect sanctuaries, but living ones where growth happens and healing begins. In a world that teaches us to armor ourselves with control, prayer teaches us to armor ourselves with trust. It reminds us that we do not have to carry everything alone, that surrender is not defeat but relief. Prayer becomes the shield that absorbs what the heart was never meant to hold by itself. Protection through prayer also extends beyond the present moment. It prepares the home for future storms by strengthening its foundation now. It builds resilience. It teaches a household how to return to peace after disruption, how to repair instead of retreat, how to love again after disappointment. Prayer does not promise a life without conflict, but it promises a way through it. When prayer is practiced consistently, it creates a rhythm, a familiar return to stillness. This rhythm becomes a refuge. Children grow up knowing that when things fall apart, they can be gathered again. Adults learn that vulnerability is not a liability, but a doorway to deeper connection. Prayer protects by shaping the culture of the home, one moment at a time. And perhaps the greatest protection prayer offers is hope. Not a shallow optimism, but a deep-rooted assurance that no matter what shakes the house, it will not collapse. That even when voices rise and hearts ache, peace is still possible. That love, when nurtured by prayer, becomes resilient enough to endure. So when we speak of a powerful prayer to shield a home, we are speaking of an act of faith that says, this place matters. The people in it matter. Their peace is worth protecting. Prayer becomes the unseen guardian, standing watch, holding space and reminding every soul within those walls that they are safe, they are loved, and they are never alone. Anxiety is a restless visitor. It paces the floors of the mind, tapping its fingers against every thought, asking questions that have no clear answers. It speaks in what-ifs and maybe-nots, in futures imagined but not yet lived. Anxiety has a way of making the heart feel crowded, as though there is no room left for breath. Yet faith, when invited, does not argue with anxiety, it answers it. Faith does not deny fear. It looks directly at it and says, you may speak, but you may not rule. When we confront anxiety with faith, we are not pretending that worry has vanished. We are choosing where to place our trust when worry insists on being heard. Faith becomes the steady ground beneath trembling feet, the quiet voice that reminds us we are more than our fears. Anxiety thrives on isolation. It convinces us that we are alone in our struggle, that no one else feels this tightness in the chest, this heaviness behind the eyes. Faith disrupts that lie. Faith says we are seen. It says our concerns are not too small, too repetitive, or too shameful to be spoken aloud. In faith, anxiety is no longer locked inside the body. It is released into the open air of prayer, where it can be held without judgment. There is power in naming what frightens us. Faith gives us permission to do just that. It allows us to say, I am afraid of what I cannot control. I am weary of carrying this alone. I am uncertain and I need help. In that honesty, anxiety loses some of its grip. What was once a shadow becomes something we can face in the light. Faith does not rush us. It does not demand instant calm or perfect composure. Faith understands the human pace of healing. It knows that peace is often built slowly, breath by breath, prayer by prayer. Faith sits with anxiety when it feels unbearable and whispers that endurance itself is an act of courage. When anxiety tightens its hold, faith widens our perspective. Anxiety narrows the world until it feels no larger than our fear. Faith gently expands it again. It reminds us of past storms survived, of moments when strength appeared just in time. Faith carries memory like a lantern, illuminating the truth that we have been sustained before, and we will be sustained again. Confronting anxiety with faith also means learning how to rest. Anxiety demands constant vigilance. It tells us that if we stop worrying, something will fall apart. Faith invites us to lay our burdens down, even if only for a moment. It teaches us that rest is not negligence, it is trust. In rest, the nervous heart relearns its own rhythm. Faith reframes uncertainty. Where anxiety sees only risk, faith sees possibility. Not the promise that everything will go as planned, but the assurance that whatever comes, we will not face it without support. Faith does not guarantee ease, it guarantees presence, and presence in times of anxiety can feel like a miracle. There are days when anxiety returns despite prayer, despite intention, despite hope. Faith does not scold us for this. Faith is not disappointed in our humanity. It remains patient, reminding us that confronting anxiety is not a one-time victory, but an ongoing relationship with courage. Each time we choose faith over despair, even briefly, we strengthen a muscle of resilience within ourselves. Faith also teaches us compassion for ourselves and for others. When we understand how anxiety weighs on the soul, we become gentler, we listen more closely, we judge less quickly. Faith turns anxiety into a teacher, showing us where we need care, boundaries, and grace. In this way, anxiety is not only confronted, it is transformed. Within a home, faith spoken aloud becomes a shared language. It allows family members to admit fear without shame, and to offer reassurance without pretense. Children learn that worry is not weakness, and adults learn that strength includes asking for help. Faith creates a culture where anxiety is met with understanding instead of silence. Confronting anxiety with faith does not mean silencing the mind, it means anchoring it. Faith becomes the anchor that holds steady when thoughts drift toward worst-case scenarios. It reminds the mind to return to the present moment where breath is still possible and support is still near. Faith also teaches surrender, a word often misunderstood. Surrender is not giving up. It is letting go of what we were never meant to control. Anxiety clings tightly to outcomes, replaying scenarios in endless loops. Faith loosens that grip. It says, do what you can, and release the rest. In that release, the body softens, and the heart finds space again. There is a quiet bravery in choosing faith when anxiety is loud. It is easier to let fear dictate our steps than to walk forward with trust. Yet every act of faith, every whispered prayer, every pause instead of panic, is an act of resistance against despair. Faith becomes a protest against hopelessness. Confronting anxiety with faith also reshapes our inner dialogue. Anxiety speaks harshly, reminding us of every mistake and every limitation. Faith speaks kindly. It calls us beloved, capable, worthy of peace. Over time, faith's voice grows stronger, not because anxiety disappears, but because we learn which voice to follow. Faith does not promise that the road will be smooth, but it promises that we will not walk it alone. It offers companionship when anxiety isolates, reassurance when anxiety overwhelms, and hope when anxiety threatens to eclipse joy. Faith is the hand we reach for in the dark, trusting that something or someone will reach back. And when calm finally comes, even briefly, faith teaches us gratitude. Not gratitude for anxiety itself, but for the strength gained in facing it, for the breath reclaimed, for the reminder that we are resilient, and that peace, though sometimes fleeting, is always worth seeking. In confronting anxiety with faith, we learn a profound truth. Fear may visit, but it does not define us. Worry may speak, but it does not own our future. Faith stands as a quiet, enduring witness, reminding us again and again that within us lives a courage deeper than anxiety, and a hope stronger than fear. Conflict does not arrive all at once. It seeps in quietly, carried on misunderstood words, unmet expectations, and silences that linger too long. It settles into corners of the heart, waiting for the right moment to speak louder than love. In every home, conflict wears many faces: raised voices, cold shoulders, weary sighs, or the ache of feeling unseen. Yet healing begins not where the argument is loudest, but where its roots are deepest. To heal conflict at its roots is to look beyond who is right and who is wrong, and to ask instead, what is hurting here? Beneath anger often lives fear. Beneath sharp words often lives disappointment. Beneath withdrawal often lives exhaustion. Healing asks us to slow down long enough to listen not only to one another but to ourselves. It asks us to notice what we have been carrying quietly and to name it with honesty. Prayer and reflection create the space where this kind of healing can begin. In that stillness, we are invited to examine our own hearts before pointing toward another's flaws. Conflict loses much of its power when humility enters the room. Humility does not diminish us, it frees us. It allows us to say, I may not see the whole picture, and in doing so opens the door to understanding. Healing at the root requires courage, the courage to confront patterns that have been passed down, repeated, and normalized. Some conflicts are not new, they are inherited. They echo old wounds, learned defenses, and histories of survival. When we acknowledge this, we stop treating conflict as a personal failure and begin seeing it as an opportunity for transformation. What was once reactive can become reflective. What was once habitual can become intentional. Forgiveness is often spoken of as the remedy for conflict, but forgiveness without understanding can feel hollow. Healing at the root invites us to understand before we absolve. It invites us to ask, what pain shaped this response? What need went unmet? In this understanding, forgiveness becomes less about excusing harm and more about releasing ourselves from the weight of resentment. There is a tenderness required to heal conflict deeply. It asks us to lower our armor and risk being vulnerable in spaces where we once felt attacked. Vulnerability can feel dangerous, especially when trust has been strained. Yet it is only through vulnerability that truth can emerge, not the truth meant to wound, but the truth meant to heal. Words matter in this work. Conflict often escalates not because of what is said, but how it is said. Healing teaches us to choose words that invite dialogue rather than defensiveness. It teaches us to speak from the place of I feel instead of you always. In doing so, we shift the conversation from accusation to connection. Listening becomes an act of love. Not listening to respond, but listening to understand. When we truly listen, we allow the other person's experience to exist without interruption or dismissal. This kind of listening does not mean agreement, it means respect. It says your feelings are real even if they are different from mine, and in that recognition, walls begin to soften. Healing conflict at its roots also requires patience. Old wounds do not close overnight. Trust, once fractured, rebuilds slowly. There may be setbacks, moments when old patterns resurface. Healing does not shame us for this. It simply invites us to return again and again to the intention of peace. Each return strengthens the foundation. In the process of healing, we learn to set boundaries, not as punishments but as protections. Boundaries clarify what we need to feel safe and respected. They teach us that love does not require self-erasure. In fact, healthy boundaries allow love to breathe. They prevent resentment from taking root again and create clearer paths for connection. Healing also calls for accountability. True peace is not achieved by ignoring harm or minimizing pain. Accountability allows us to acknowledge where we have caused hurt and to take responsibility without self-condemnation. It is an act of integrity to say I was wrong, and an act of grace to say I am willing to change. In a home committed to healing, conflict becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. It reveals where communication has broken down, where expectations need revisiting, where care has been neglected. Instead of fearing conflict, the household learns to approach it with curiosity and compassion. Conflict then becomes a signal not of failure but of growth waiting to happen. Healing at the root transforms the emotional climate of a home. It replaces tension with trust, avoidance with openness. Children raised in such an environment learn that disagreement does not mean disconnection. They learn that repair is possible, that love can survive difficult conversations, and that peace is something practiced, not assumed. This healing also extends inward. Often the conflicts we experience with others mirror unresolved conflicts within ourselves. When we make peace with our own imperfections, when we offer ourselves grace, we become less reactive, less defensive. Inner healing radiates outward, changing the way we engage with the people we love. There is a quiet dignity in choosing healing over winning. Winning an argument may bring temporary satisfaction, but healing a relationship brings lasting peace. Healing asks us to prioritize connection over control, understanding over dominance. It asks us to remember why the relationship matters more than the moment. At its deepest level, healing conflict is an act of hope. It is the belief that people can change, that love can mature, and that broken places are not the end of the story. It is the faith that even after harsh words and heavy silences, reconciliation is still possible. When conflict is healed at its roots, the home becomes lighter, not because problems vanish, but because they are no longer carried alone. The atmosphere shifts, laughter returns more easily, conversations feel safer, the heart rests more fully. What once divided now teaches unity. Healing does not erase the past, but it redeems it. It takes what was painful and uses it to build wisdom. It transforms scars into reminders of resilience. And in doing so, it affirms a powerful truth that love, when nurtured with honesty, humility, and grace, is capable of restoring what conflict once threatened to destroy. A home is shaped not only by what is built within its walls, but by what is invited to dwell there. Beyond furniture and paint, beyond schedules and responsibilities, there is an atmosphere that settles into every room. It is felt more than seen. It speaks in the tone of voices, in the way doors are closed, in the ease or unease with which people breathe. Creating a sacred home atmosphere is not about perfection. It is about intention. Sacred does not mean silent. It does not mean free of laughter or untouched by struggle. Sacred means set apart. It means a space where the spirit is allowed to rest, where dignity is protected, and where love is practiced deliberately. A sacred home is not defined by its size or its orderliness, but by the care with which its people treat one another and themselves. Prayer, reflection, and mindful presence are the architects of this atmosphere. When these are practiced even imperfectly, the home begins to change. The air feels softer. Tension loosens its grip. Conversations slow down enough to carry meaning. The home becomes a place where one can arrive as they are and still feel welcome. Creating sacredness begins with awareness. It asks us to notice how energy moves through our space. Are words spoken hurriedly, sharply, without thought? Are they chosen with care, even in moments of frustration? A sacred atmosphere grows where words are used to heal rather than harm, to invite rather than dismiss. Each sentence becomes a brick laid carefully into the foundation of peace. Ritual plays a quiet but powerful role. Simple, repeated acts. Lighting a candle, sharing a meal, pausing for prayer or gratitude. Anchor the home in intention. These rituals do not need to be grand or formal. Their power lies in consistency. They remind everyone within the space that this home has a rhythm, a heartbeat that prioritizes connection over chaos. In a sacred home, time is treated with reverence. Moments are not always rushed past in pursuit of productivity. There is room to linger, to listen, to simply be. This does not mean that responsibilities disappear. It means they are held in balance with rest. A sacred atmosphere teaches that worth is not measured solely by output but by presence. Sound matters. The music played, the volume of voices, the silence allowed, all shape the spirit of a home. Sacredness welcomes sounds that soothe and silences that comfort. Silence, in particular, is often misunderstood. In a sacred home, silence is not avoidance, it is space. Space for thought, space for feeling, space for renewal. Light also has its language. Natural light spilling into a room can lift the spirit. Soft lighting in the evening can signal rest. These small attentions communicate care. They say this place is meant to support you, not drain you. Creating a sacred atmosphere is at its heart an act of hospitality toward the soul. A sacred home honors emotion. Joy is celebrated openly. Grief is given room to breathe. Anger is acknowledged without being allowed to dominate. No feeling is shamed for existing. Instead, emotions are treated as messengers carrying information about what needs attention. In such an environment, emotional honesty becomes a form of prayer. Cleanliness and order, while not the essence of sacredness, can support it. Not a rigid order that stifles life, but a mindful care that communicates respect for the space and the people who share it. Tidying becomes less about control and more about stewardship, tending to what has been entrusted to us. Sacredness grows where forgiveness is practiced. Mistakes will happen. Words will miss their mark. Tempers will flare. A sacred home does not pretend otherwise. What sets it apart is its commitment to repair. Apologies are spoken. Grace is extended. The past is not weaponized against the present. In this way, the home becomes a place of continual renewal. Creating a sacred atmosphere also means setting boundaries with the outside world. Not everything deserves entry. Constant noise, relentless negativity, and unexamined stress can erode peace if allowed to dominate. A sacred home discerns what it allows in, media, conversations, influences, and chooses what aligns with its values. This discernment is not isolation, it is protection. Children raised in a sacred home learn something profound, that they are safe to be themselves. They learn that home is a place to return to, not escape from. They carry this sense of safety into the world, becoming adults who know how to create peace wherever they go. The sacred atmosphere becomes a legacy, passed down not through words alone, but through lived experience. For adults, a sacred home becomes a refuge, a place where masks can be set down, where strength is not constantly demanded, where rest is honored as necessary, not indulgent. In such a space, resilience is restored and hope is replenished. Sacredness does not require uniform belief, only shared respect. Even in homes where faith is expressed differently, sacredness can thrive through mutual honor and kindness. It grows where listening is valued, where curiosity replaces judgment, and where love is expressed in ways each person can receive. Nature, too, can be invited into the sacred atmosphere. Plants, fresh air, reminders of the living world beyond the walls reconnect the home to something larger than itself. They whisper continuity, growth, and renewal. They remind us that life, even when fragile, persists. Creating a sacred home atmosphere is an ongoing practice, not a completed task. Some days it will feel effortless, other days it will require conscious effort. There will be moments when sacredness feels distant, when stress overwhelms intention. In those moments, returning to simple practices, a deep breath, a kind word, a quiet prayer, can realign the space. Ultimately, a sacred home is one where love is chosen repeatedly. Not perfectly, but faithfully. It is a place where peace is not assumed, but cultivated. Where each person is seen not as a problem to be managed, but as a soul to be honored. Such a home does not shut out the world's troubles. It prepares its people to face them. It sends them out grounded, supported, and reminded of who they are. And when they return tired, hopeful, uncertain, they are met by an atmosphere that says, "You belong here. Rest. You are held." In creating a sacred home atmosphere, we participate in a quiet revolution. We declare that tenderness has value, that stillness has power, and that love, practiced daily, can transform ordinary spaces into places of healing. Sunday arrives not as an interruption, but as an invitation. It steps into the week with a gentleness that asks us to pause, to look at what we have been carrying, and to consider what we are ready to lay down. Sunday does not demand productivity. It offers permission to breathe more deeply, to move more slowly, to remember who we are beneath the noise of obligation. Renewal begins with stopping. In a world that praises constant motion, Sunday reminds us that rest is not laziness. It is wisdom. It is the quiet recognition that the soul, like the body, requires restoration. When we honor Sunday as a moment of renewal, we acknowledge that strength is replenished, not manufactured. We allow ourselves to be refilled rather than endlessly poured out. Sunday carries a memory older than calendars. It holds the echo of gathering, of reflection, of setting aside time to reconnect with meaning. Even for those who do not mark it with formal ritual, Sunday still whispers of reset and return. It offers a threshold between what has been and what is yet to come. Standing on that threshold, we are invited to choose intention over habit. Renewal is not about erasing the past week. It is about interpreting it with compassion. Sunday gives us space to ask, what did this week teach me? Where was I stretched? Where did I shrink? In this gentle review, we are not judging ourselves. We are learning ourselves. Sunday teaches that awareness is the first step toward change. There is a sacredness in beginning again. Sunday honors that sacredness. It reminds us that no matter how heavy the week has been, no matter how many times patience was lost or hope felt thin, we are not disqualified from peace. Renewal does not require perfection. It requires willingness. Willingness to try again, to forgive again, to believe again. Sunday slows the clock. Meals are shared with more presence. Conversations linger a little longer. Silence is allowed to settle without urgency. In these unhurried moments, the nervous heart begins to settle. Renewal happens quietly, often unnoticed at first. It arrives as a softening, a subtle release of tension, a breath that finally reaches the bottom of the lungs. In homes that honor Sunday as renewal, the atmosphere changes. Voices lower, expectations soften. The home becomes less about function and more about feeling. Children sense it. Adults feel it. The space seems to exhale. This collective pause strengthens bonds, reminding everyone that they belong not only to schedules but to one another. Sunday also invites spiritual alignment. It calls us back to our values when the week may have pulled us off center. It asks us to remember what matters most, not in theory but in practice. Love, kindness, integrity, gratitude. These are not abstract ideas on Sunday, they are lived choices. Renewing our commitment to them steadies us for the days ahead. There is courage in rest. To stop is to trust that the world will keep turning without our constant intervention. Sunday teaches this trust gently. It shows us that when we rest, we do not fall behind, we catch up with ourselves. We hear thoughts that were drowned out by busyness. We feel emotions that were postponed. Renewal requires this honesty. Sunday holds space for grief as well as joy. It does not insist on cheerfulness. It allows tears to come without explanation. It allows laughter to rise without guilt. In this way, Sunday becomes a container for the full range of human experience. Renewal does not deny pain. It integrates it, making room for healing to occur. For many, Sunday is a time of prayer or reflection, spoken or silent. These moments re-anchor the spirit. They remind us that we are connected to something larger than our immediate worries. Prayer on Sunday is not about asking for more strength to endure exhaustion. It is about receiving the strength that comes from rest, trust, and surrender. Sunday renewal also extends into the body. Sleep is honored. Meals are savored. Movement becomes gentle rather than driven. The body, often treated as a tool during the week, is recognized as a companion on Sunday. When the body is respected, the mind follows. Renewal becomes holistic, touching every layer of being. There is a subtle recalibration that happens on Sunday. The frantic urgency of the week loosens its grip, and priorities realign. What felt overwhelming on Friday may feel manageable by Sunday afternoon. Not because the problems disappeared, but because perspective returned. Renewal gives us back our sense of proportion. Sunday teaches us to carry rest forward. Its purpose is not confined to a single day. It prepares us for the week ahead. The peace cultivated on Sunday becomes a resource we draw from on Wednesday. The clarity gained becomes guidance when decisions press in. Renewal is not an escape. It is preparation. In honoring Sunday, we also honor time itself. We stop treating it as an enemy to outrun and begin treating it as a gift to steward. Sunday reminds us that life is not meant to be consumed all at once, but experienced deliberately. This reverence for time protects us from burnout and bitterness. Renewal on Sunday often begins with gratitude. Gratitude for what sustained us. Gratitude for what taught us. Gratitude for what we survived. Gratitude does not ignore hardship. It reframes it. It shifts our gaze from scarcity to sufficiency, from despair to resilience. In gratitude, the heart regains its balance. Sunday also invites reconciliation. Apologies find space to be spoken. Forgiveness finds room to unfold. When the pace slows, we remember that relationships matter more than being right. Renewal restores connection not only with others but with ourselves. For those who live alone, Sunday still offers companionship. In books and music and nature and reflection. Renewal does not require a crowd, it requires presence. Sunday teaches that solitude can be nourishing when chosen, not imposed. As evening approaches, Sunday does not rush us toward Monday. It allows a gentle transition. The anxiety of the coming week may stir, but Sunday meets it with reassurance. It says, "You are more prepared than you think. You are not starting empty. You are carrying rest with you." In honoring Sunday as a moment of renewal, we make a quiet declaration that our lives are worth tending to with care. That rest is a right, not a reward. That beginning again is always possible. Sunday stands as a reminder that we are not defined by our fatigue, our mistakes, or our unfinished tasks. We are defined by our capacity to renew, to return to hope, to realign with purpose, to rise again with softened hearts and steadier spirits. And so Sunday does what it has always done for those willing to receive it. It opens its hands and offers renewal, not loudly, not forcefully, but faithfully. It invites us to step into the coming days not depleted but restored, not hardened but hopeful, not scattered but whole.